Hi, my name's Ken Condon. I'm the host of a new show, Riding in the Zone. We're going to take you on a journey into the world of motorcycles, everything from flat track and road racing to riding the open road. We'll introduce you to people and happenings in the motorcycling community. We'll also give you insights on how to be the best rider you can be. Whether you love the speed and grace of the racetrack or the freedom of open spaces, Riding in the Zone will be a window into the wide world of motorcycling. Hi, this is Ken Condon from Riding in the Zone. Today we have somebody special in the studio. Her name is Melissa Holbrook Pierson. She's an author, journalist, and motorcyclist. Hey, Melissa.
Hi, Ken.
So, really appreciate you coming in today.
Always a pleasure.
Great. So, how I first knew you was from your book, The Perfect Vehicle. That book really inspired me. I thought it was just a great look at sort of inspiring other people to perhaps consider motorcycles as, you know, something more than just, you know, some kind of vehicle that people sort of have fun on. So tell us more about what your inspiration was for that book.
It was when I started riding, I thought, oh my gosh, this is incredible. Like, why didn't I know about this before? I think it's something you have to do and experience yourself. I thought that there had to be some hunger out there for, you know, among people who didn't ride to try to understand why people ride, why their friends were so passionate about riding. And so I really very naively wrote this book with non-motorcyclists in mind, because I figured, well, motorcyclists already know all this stuff. They're not going to be interested in reading it. It was exactly the opposite. Mm-hmm. Really pretty much exclusively motorcyclists read it, and I think what they responded to was the corroboration of their own experience, the things that they had never put in words or seen out there on the page. Not that we need for anybody else to tell us how important riding is, mm-hmm. but that they saw their experience in this book, and you know, basically nobody else really cared to read it, because you know, if you're not inside this experience, you don't know how big it is and how deep it is. Mm. It's to me, it's everything. It's intellectual, it's spiritual, it's physiological, it's social, and it's existential.
Mm. I totally agree. And what got me when I was reading it, because I'd been a motorcyclist for, I don't know, 20 years when I read it, is that it was my voice. You actually expressed, you know, what I had always tried to do when I came across somebody who really was curious about motorcycling. Mm-hmm. You know, and even some of my motorcycling friends, when I tried to talk to them about, you know, just how deep it goes, because they might only experience it in a very narrow way. So I thought that was just such a nice insight, and it was so literary in how you wrote it, and the prose was beautiful.
Over the years, a lot of men have given that book to the women in their lives that they wanted to encourage to ride. You know, see, here's another woman who does it, and also to say, this is why it's such an important part of my life and why I want you to share that. I don't know how well it's worked as a tool of persuasion, and maybe it shouldn't work that well, because I don't know that everybody should be riding. And a lot of times people come to me and say, I have this little nagging doubt in my mind about whether or not I should ride. Can you encourage me somehow? And I say, actually, I'm not going to do that, because I do think if there's something inside that says, I don't think so. Or, you know, I've already taken the beginning MSF course, and I was actually scared, or I didn't really get it, or it didn't feel that good. I want to say, then that's the voice you should listen to, that says, you know what, it's not for everyone. Not everything can be for everyone.
That's right. And when I was teaching MSF beginners, oftentimes women would come with their husbands, and oftentimes I'd ask them, I'd say, you know, why are you here? You know, just ask anybody that. And they'd say, well, because my husband wants me to ride. And I kind of always had that little bit of a, you know, a twinge of, that's not a great reason to ride.
Yeah, exactly. I really think it needs to feed something in you. And for me, it clicked immediately. You know, I describe in the book, the class was over 2 weekends, and after the first weekend, I went home and I said to my boyfriend, okay, I'm ready to shop for a bike. And he said, well, don't you want to wait for the next class? Wait for what? I don't need to wait. I just knew that this was something I wanted to do that it felt right.
Nice. So talk to us a little bit about being a woman, and it seems to be a theme we've had going on in Riding in the Zone interviews. What thoughts might you have about women who are considering getting into riding? Your experience as a woman in motorcycling, typically a male-dominated field.
Well, recently an interviewer asked me that, how I feel looking back on the experience of starting riding at a time when women were, far less well represented than they are today. And I had to say that my experience of riding isn't gendered, because it was, this physical person on a motorcycle. So, and I only know how it feels to be a woman. So I can't speak to it. It was people looking at me from the outside whose perception was gendered, not mine. How women are perceived by others, that's an interesting question. I do think it's, when we're seen doing things, then that makes it acceptable, right? So, if you're the first woman that anybody's ever seen on a motorcycle, it can be a shock. And all women have encountered that surprise among certain sectors of society or other places that you go riding. They literally can't believe what they're seeing. Yeah. It's like, you rode that here? I apparently yes.
Yeah.
Here I am. So I don't think I ride like a woman. What does that mean? What would that mean?
And that's something that women are a really big part of the growth of motorcycling right now, and the competence of women, I don't think, is in question for anybody who's paying attention. I mean, for those that are really kind of stuck in the traditional roles, it's hard for them to admit that that's the case.
I have a friend who has an interesting project. It's called Global Women Who Ride, and she brings stories of women riding all over the world, and especially in those cultures where there's sometimes pretty serious prescription, and there are women, there are young girls who are now riding at risk of fairly serious punishment, but because they want to do it that much, they're willing to take that on, and that to me is hugely inspirational, and it also speaks, I think, to the power of riding.
The one thing I wanted to also point out about the idea of, like, if you're really not, it's not speaking to you about riding, that is a very important thing, that the risk is high, the reward has to be higher.
Yes,
right?
Yes, I was explaining that to my son, because he's 18 and recently got his driver's license, and one of the things that riding a motorcycle has done, I believe firmly, is made me a far safer car driver. And I thought, as soon as he gets his license, I want him to either do a track day or to, I'll just, not for purposes necessarily of riding a motorcycle. If it clicks with him, great, but get him into that class, because it teaches, a defensive attitude on the road that is useful for anybody. And so I was explaining to him, honey, if you got into that class and you just felt it, like, this is for me. This feels right. It feels good. I love this sensation. Then I'm willing to undergo it. But for me, I can only take that risk for myself. I can't tell anybody else that they should. I want you to, you should go out and, expose yourself to a higher level of danger than other people.
Yeah, with my daughter, who's now 28, she's an avid motorcyclist, and that was when she was at that age. I really said, "Do you really want to do this?" Because if not, I'd just soon you not do it. It can be pretty risky, and she, of course, was all in, and she's gone in very deep. She's found how deep the well is.
Right,
so,
and obviously it works for her, and I think it's sort of organization of your brain and your physical attributes that sometimes meshes with motorcycles, because they're an extension of your body, right? I wrote a piece recently for a British magazine about how a motorcycle fits you, and the motorcycle that fits you the best is the one that disappears. If you feel it too much, what we long for, I think, is that sensation where it's no longer there, and it's just us in connection with, kinetic movement and the world, but I don't really feel my motorcycle under me unless it doesn't really fit very well.
Yeah, there's some motorcycles that feel that you can connect with much quicker and easier than others. I've actually brings up a point about when we were talking about this electric motorcycle I rode. When it took away the sort of visceral feeling of an internal combustion engine, and it was an electric motor, and the sounds were gone, I felt very much like I was floating and flying.
I wondered about how that would feel, because to me, a big part of it, because I guess maybe because this is all I've ever experienced on two wheels, is that vibration and the you feel when the gears engage, and there's the ka-chunk and and the sound, and I think we respond to different motorcycle sounds. It resonates in our body. They all have different vibration patterns and noise and stuff, and that to me is why I fell in love with Italian motorcycles, is the sound they produce.
Yeah, so you had Moto Guzzis, I remember, right?
Yeah.
So what do you have for bikes now in your garage?
Well, I have 3, which is like, unprecedented riches, because for years and years I just had one, and so it was like, if that one bike didn't start, I wasn't going riding. And now I can go into the garage and say, do I want to ride my new Moto Guzzi, or do I want to ride my BMW? Well, they're different bikes, they're set up differently, everything about them is different. So when I'm going on a long highway trip, when I was coming here, it was going to be mainly on the slab, as we say. So I want my comfortable, more powerful, windscreen, all that kind of stuff. But when I'm going out on the back roads, I think it's very telling which motorcycle you are drawn to for a certain, if I could be on this bike all the time, I'd choose this one. If I'm tooling around the mountain roads where I live, I want to be on my Moto Guzzi, because it just feels like the dancing partner that I want at that moment.
And that's an analogy I often use with my students, particularly, is try to associate that motorcycle as your dance partner, and then you start to feel how you're interacting with it. So you've got the BMW, it's an R1150?
50R.
Yeah. And then the Guzzi is what?
It's a new V7
Oh yeah.
too. It's red and black and white. And I still have also the Lario that I was given by a very special group of people who actually didn't know me at the time. I had sold the Lario that I had written about in The Perfect Vehicle, and that was the motorcycle of my heart. But sometimes life takes us into different places. I was moving into sort of a non-motorcycle phase of my life, and also I couldn't fix the problems that were starting to crop up in that bike, and so I sadly sold it. And then it was one of those things that I know a lot of people get to, why did I do that? Why did I do that? Something is missing from my life. You know, really, it feels that deep. There's something is gone, something missing. And then, you know, many people also have certain types of personal crises that call into question everything that preceded. And I had one of those, and this group of motorcyclists in New England got wind of it, and because they're, you know, the Guzzisti are a very tight band for various reasons. We need to be. And they heard this, and when I got back into riding, I bought a BMW, and they thought there was something very much the matter with me on a BMW, and they found a Lario for sale, and they restored it and gave it to me. And it was one of the most profound and moving episodes in my life. There's nothing to compare to that. I mean, it was a gift of the heart, and to me, it exemplifies how deep motorcycles and motorcycling can be in your life. And I think for a lot of us, our true brethren are, you know, the people we feel bonded to more tightly sometimes than blood, are other motorcyclists. And the question of why that should be is the one that I want to explore in my writing, because I think it's a very interesting, ultimately not even social question, but it's a human question. It's a species question.
That's interesting. There have been conversations about how there can be polarization in amongst the motorcycling community, and that, you know, that doesn't make a lot of sense when you start thinking about that we are experiencing this thing that it's a very special thing.
Yeah.
And so that's something that, even though we ride one type of motorcycle or another, we do identify, because sometimes it's because this motorcycle does something that other motorcycles don't. And the Guzzi, I know when I've ridden them, there's nothing like a Moto Guzzi, right?
Right? Yeah.
They're so cool. And the Lario is like a special, you know, that's, for those who don't know, that's an 80s, was it 88, 87?
87.
87. So they're not, you know, they're pretty rare. So for them to find one and then to restore it, that's pretty special.
Very, very, very special, and I will never get rid of that bike.
No, you can't. That would be, that's beautiful. And I saw their photos of your original Larios in the book. Right? Now you wrote a second book, The Man Who
Would Stop at Nothing.
And that's about long distance riding.
Yeah, extreme long distance riding. When I discovered that there are people out there doing these insane pileups of mileage, you know, you get out your calculator and you go, but that's not humanly possible to do 1,500 miles in 24 hours. And not only just one of those, but there are people who are doing whole strings of them. I thought, wow, maybe there is something more to explore in riding, because it seemed to me to be a distillation, you know, a sort of a purification of what motorcycling really is, to be so driven and so passionate as to want to do nothing else in this world but that.
I associate it with a long distance runner or ice fishing. If you have to ask, you're never going to get it, right?
Exactly. So, but I have this thing in me that I want to explain, and it's a way really of getting down into it myself. I only through the act of writing do I actually finally learn what I think about something. It's just, I guess it is sort of it is like motorcycling itself. It's something you have to do. You can't talk about it, you can't think about it. Finally, you comprehend in the act of doing. So that's what, to me, writing is. And I just really wanted to try to understand. And it's this whole subculture. You know, it's like they've got their secret codes and all that kind of stuff. And it's an amazing world that if outsiders really knew what was going on, you know, and the Iron Butt Association doesn't necessarily want you to know exactly what's going on, you know, because they don't want to be shut down. But they are, you know, pound for pound, the safest riders there are, because they're doing, you know, massive miles, and you know, in a thing like the Iron Butt Rally, there are very, very, very few accidents.
Yeah, and the Iron Butt is, remind me of what the mileage is and the requirements.
11, roughly speaking, it's 11,000 miles over 11 days. And once you, all while you are, you know, looking for bonus points, and that helps organize the experience. So it's not just going out onto the highways and just, you know, running up the clock. It's, you have to stay, you know, on top of things enough to follow, you know, to route yourself on the most efficient route to get the big bonus points, and then you have to log everything and take photographs and have the evidence, and it's a massive undertaking.
Yeah, I've known a few people who've done it, and I scratch my head.
I know.
You know, of all the things that I've done and want to do, that's not one of them.
Not one of them. Yeah, I mean, I dabbled in it a little bit. I did a 24-hour rally, and, you know, rode pretty much for 22 hours straight, which is something that was very hard for me to do and probably not advisable, but I felt I needed to do it. I needed to have that experience, and once you're in it, for me it was very hard to say, with my goal in sight, I actually should get off the road, and I should have. There's no question about that, but I got lucky.
And I think like exploring that sort of thing, it helps you find your limits, your own personal limits, and obviously the physical limits, but even your psychological and
exactly.
Emotional limits.
It's everything. Right? It's everything.
I mean, motorcycling is that way. I mean, it really is a conduit for accessing places that you're not going to access otherwise. I suppose there are other ways of doing it, but motorcycling just has this universal an opportunity for people to start to really understand themselves in a lot of ways. I know camping, distance camping is one of my things that when I first discovered that, it was like me and my motorcycle. I'm talking about more than a day's way from home. Like if something were to happen, I couldn't be home that night. And that started to really give me a sense of, wow, I'm connected to this machine.
Yes, absolutely. It becomes your lifeline or your friend, or, I mean, I don't really personify my motorcycle. It's, I know it's not a person, it doesn't even have a name, but it's like your comrades in arms or something. It's something you depend on, and that's why you want to take good care of your motorcycle.
Right, and learn how to work on it.
Exactly.
We were talking about that a little bit.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, anything else you'd like to share? We have motorcycle riders and non-motorcycle riders are going to be watching this. Anything you'd like to? I think that the more that I do it, the more that I think that motorcycling is a truly profound reflection of what it means to live. I think it's sort of a metaphor in action in a lot of ways, and I sometimes feel when I'm riding along that, oh my gosh, I'm in possession of one of the great secrets, that's out in full view, but nobody really knows the interior value unless you do it. I agree. So anybody who really is interested in riding a motorcycle, you can ask people that you know that ride, a neighbor or whatnot. We always encourage you to take a beginner rider course, right?
Always.
Always. So the Motorcycle Safety Foundation, MSF, they are active in all the states. There's also Total Control is another organization. That's the way that you can go there. They'll supply the motorcycles, they'll supply helmets, and you can actually get a taste of what it's about. And like you were saying earlier, get a feel for whether it really speaks to you or not, because it doesn't speak to everybody. Now, those of you who have been riding forever and you just sort of think, well, I just like to ride on the weekends, that's cool. But I bet you can relate to an awful lot of what Melissa's been talking about, that it's that special sort of connection that you've got. Well, that's been great. This has been really terrific having you, Melissa.
Thanks.
Great. All right. So that's it. Another episode of Riding in the Zone. We will be back soon. Thank you for coming.